Right, hey guys, how we doing? Back in another video from O'Hara, and today we are checking out what if Luffy, Ace, and Sabo were on one crew? You know, like they intended. They were kids, they were best friends, they were brothers. That's what they wanted, and then obviously things didn't quite go that way. Let's see what happens in this video.
Sabo was nearly killed at 10 years old,
Uh-huh.
Ace left when he was 17, and Luffy started his own pirate adventure 3 years later, which left these three adopted brothers separated until much later in the story.
Yeah, it's amazing how long that went on for.
But what if these three ridiculously strong kids had somehow stuck together and formed one of the most exciting pirate crews ever?
It would be awesome.
In other words, what would have happened if Ace, Sabo, and Luffy had formed their own pirate crew? And well, of course, everything would begin back in the Goa Kingdom,
Okay.
where Ace, Sabo, and Luffy all grew up together. And our version of the story kicks off the moment where the royals of this island are about to burn this massive heap of trash town
Right.
to get rid of all the poor people, to not leave a, bad impression on the celestial dragons who are coming to visit. How nice of them. And you might remember that this is where Ace and Luffy were nearly killed by these thugs here. And
Yeah.
after this event, Sabo was so disgusted by his wealthy family that he just wanted to get the hell out of there. And as you might remember, originally he set out in this little
The
boat
tiny boat that got blown
right
up,
here
yeah.
and got absolutely crushed by this celestial dragon ship. But for our scenario, let's imagine that Luffy and Ace somehow managed to stop Sabo from leaving the islands.
Right, yeah.
Maybe they kidnap him from his parents
Or just maybe have a conversation.
and fake his death, or even intercept him right before he's about to leave the
That'd be
island. And so from
cool,
here on
yeah.
out, they just
Okay.
continue their lives as they originally had ever since Luffy joined their trio. They live up in the mountains, training and growing much stronger until the day that they are actually ready to begin their pirate adventure. And that day comes 7 years later. Ace and Sabo are now both 17, while Luffy is still only 14. So yeah, Luffy's going to set out way sooner than he did in the original story, and while you might be saying that he must absolutely wait until he's 17, I just don't see Ace and Sabo waiting around until they're
Yeah, they're not gonna sit around waiting, are they? They've got such adventurous spirits.
20 to head out to sea. And so in order for these three to stay together, they have to leave right now. This leads them to buy a ship with all the treasure that they've stolen so far,
Nice.
and they finally set out into the ocean. Which, seeing how Luffy almost drowned right away when he first started his own journey, this could quickly end in disaster. However, thankfully, Sabo always had a little bit of an interest in navigation, which helps them to at least survive, let's give them 1 day at sea. But
And it also works out because at this point Sabo isn't a devil fruit user, is he? So he can actually swim in that, not affected by the sea. It's good to have one person that's able
hold on
to
tight, because
handle
there
that.
are some major problems coming up very soon. But the first very big and basic question, I guess, is where do they go from here? Luffy, of course, just wants to go somewhere with some really good food.
Food.
Sabo wants to head to a nearby island, and Ace wants to track down this mysterious bounty hunter that he has heard so much about.
Okay.
But with all three pulling the sails in different directions all the time, they snap the mast and their ship is hopelessly
That's such a cool idea.
broken right from the start. Well, that lasted only a short time. The three drift helplessly until they crash land on this mysterious island right here. However,
Okay.
before we can get into the game-changing events on this first island, let's shift back to when these three were kids, because back in chapter 585, there is a super important moment here that we must understand to see how this crew will turn out in the future. Because in this chapter, they basically explain what each of their individual dreams are. Sabo just wants to
So then actually making them the goals as they're older.
be
Yeah, cool.
free from the oppression of his parents. On the other hand, Ace simply wants people to know his name and recognize him for who he is. Remember, he's still dealing with a lot of shame and guilt of being the son of the former pirate king. And Luffy, shares his own secret dream. Nope, not becoming the king of pirates, but the one we are still to this day actually waiting to learn in the current
Knowing.
story. Probably to throw a giant party or something like that.
I mean, I'm behind now. I read like 4 or 5 chapters after Wano. I'm now waiting for the physical manga volumes to come out to read it, because I found I enjoyed it better that way. So yeah, if there's bits mentioned here that I'm kind of like, it's because I am purposely behind now so that I can read it the way I want to. But anyway.
That. However, Ace and Sabo do think it's hilarious. But then we get to their first real point of conflict and one of the reasons that they never made a crew in the first place in the original version. And that's because, of course, they all basically assumed that they would, of course, be the captain of their own ship and the others would join their crew. But none of the three obviously wanted that, so they had originally decided to meet up again once they were all strong pirates. And so fast forward again to their current situation, and the three are now shipwrecked on this island, which, by the way, is from the Ace novel. Big recommendation if you haven't read that.
I still haven't read that, you know.
And they meet this crusty...
There's 2 parts, isn't this, that Ace novel? I mean, yeah.
fellow called Masked Deuce. Now, Deuce was also shipwrecked on this island, and they're basically stuck and starving until Ace, just like in the original story, finds this random, mysterious-looking fruit. A very hungry Deuce...
Oh, is this how we get...
nearly kills Ace to get that fruit, but after Ace takes this first bite, he shares the rest with everyone else. And just like originally, this of course gives Ace his fire powers, and now with his new abilities and Luffy's devil fruit powers, they're able to make a very decent raft to help them get off the island, and
so that's how he gets it, alright.
Deuce of course comes along as the first new member of that crew. And
yeah, because when it's the first bite that gives you the power, isn't it? Because then it doesn't matter what you do with the rest of it, yeah.
And he's not just some random guy, he actually comes from a medical family, so he will serve as the crew's doctor. Oh, but wait, aren't we forgetting something? I mean, a new crew also needs a name. So at this point, they decide to call themselves the
Sake Cup Pirates. I like that. Cool.
Pirates, based on the sake cups that represent their bond as brothers. And so now their 4-member crew is going to need a new ship as well. So whatever island they find next, they manage to steal a boat and continue on their journey. However, instead of heading straight for the Grand Line, they actually decide to be smart for once and spend some more time gaining experience in East Blue and looking for other members. Of course, they still don't have an official captain yet, but they surprisingly decide on some sort of democratic system of voting on where to go next, which basically just leads to them traveling around for a while, defeating other pirate crews and making a name for themselves. And while Luffy himself is younger and weaker than he was when he first set out in the normal story, this is more than made up for by having the powerful Ace and Sabo by his side.
God, like the combined might, man.
Plus, they have spent all those years continuing to train together, all 3 of them, so I think this version of Luffy might actually be even stronger than normal Luffy at age 14.
I mean, possibly, yeah, because Sabo and Ace would push him, I guess, yeah.
And so during these roughly 6 months they spent in the East Blue, they actually meet and recruit Usopp. Now, Usopp is also younger, but he is still an orphan. The whole conflict on his island isn't even happening yet, so there's really no one to defeat here. Still, Usopp and Luffy get along really well, so that Luffy invites him to join, and Usopp accepts. However, they don't get the going merry, of course, since they never actually saved Usopp Village. In fact, it's not looking that great for his village later on in the story. But
yeah, because if Usopp's gone and then that happens afterwards, oh god.
There's actually a very similar circumstance with Sanji, because after the Sake Cup pirates come to this floating restaurant to recruit a cook, let's just say they somehow convince Sanji to join them as well. Maybe Zeph once again kicks him out, or he decides to follow his dreams by himself to find the All Blue. On the other hand, Nami joining is a little bit more of an issue here, because remember that Nami originally only joined Luffy to steal his money, and then after he rescued her and the village, she actually wanted to become part of the crew. However, in this version of the story, the Sake Cup pirates definitely wouldn't encounter this clown pirate yet, because he would not have invaded Orange Town until years later.
Changes. There's some changes happening.
In other words, no initial encounter with Nami. However, I definitely think that the Sake Cup pirates would eventually come to Nami's island, and while Ace would probably not want to get involved with the fishmen, Sabo and Luffy would never stand for the people of the island being enslaved by Arlong. And so in their first major fight, the 3 of them together beat down the notorious fishmen and save the people of the village. This leads Nami to officially join the crew, and while Sabo is also a navigator, Nami is literally going to be the greatest navigator in the story, so he can take a backseat to our orange-haired navigating goddess.
They can help each other out at times, though, you know.
Okay, so let's check. Usopp, Sanji, Nami, and wait, aren't we missing someone? Now,
Zoro.
remember that
That's what Ace is searching for, isn't it? That's what he said, yeah.
we're still about 2.5 years before the start of the original story, so Zoro would definitely not have been captured at Shelltown and would still be out and about bounty hunting. Which in other words means it is very likely that the green-haired swordsman would cross paths with the Sake Cup pirates, and I think that they would
Yeah, because if they're doing what they're doing now, all three of them, surely there's a decent bounty on them and he's going to want that.
actually develop some sort of respectful rivalry over the next months, where basically Zoro keeps coming after them, but is beaten down each time by one of the brothers. And then at the last moment, before the Sake Cup pirates head to the Grand Line, he then tries to beat them one last time. Of course, he would fail, after all it's all three of them, but the crew would
Yeah,
then
he ain't
invite
winning
him
that.
to join them on their adventure, and he would agree. I mean, what better way to become the world's strongest swordsman, right? So, bam, the gang is all here with
Whoop,
a
whoop.
few extras, and let's continue forward to all of the unbelievable changes that are gonna come up in the Grand Line and the mind-blowing future that awaits this incredibly young crew. Now again, Luffy and the other original Straw Hats are still about 2.5 years younger than they were before, but that also means that events cannot play out just like they did in the original story.
Yeah.
In other words, this won't just be the speedrun version of the Grand Line that Luffy and Co are doing in the original story, as the crew will take more time and take it more slowly, going from island to island and exploring a little bit. And of course, things are going to be much different. For example, Alabasta would not be having its civil war quite yet, so
Yeah, so yeah, this does change, like, events that they get involved with. They won't be getting involved with yet.
we will basically just skip that entire arc, which means no Robin for now, and since Mass Deuce is the crew's doctor, the crew don't go looking for another one,
So no
we
Chopper.
do not get Chopper
Damn.
as well. And before we go any further,
Interesting.
there's actually still one super important thing that we haven't yet discussed in terms of the power dynamics of that crew. You see, after 6 months in the East Blue, Sabo, Ace, and Luffy have all gotten much stronger, and especially Ace with his Logia powers can easily take on nearly anyone that they meet in this part of the world.
Crazy.
And at least for now, Luffy would very likely still be the weakest of the three
Which is crazy to think about.
brothers, but that gap is starting to close pretty rapidly now. And at this point, the crew would probably still want to go up to Skypiea, so that whole arc continues pretty much normally. And if I'm not mistaken, the Lightning Fruit user NL should already be oppressing the Skypieans at that point too. And while the others aren't too sure about getting involved, Luffy absolutely refuses to leave without freeing the people from this false god. The rest of the crew actually begrudgingly supports this decision, and so they start the battle. Luffy and Ace can certainly fight with Enel with their rubber and Logia powers, and I think Sabo would be smart enough to find some sort of sea stone or dial to be able to contribute to the fight as well,
Yeah.
and eventually they manage to take down the Lightning Man, which would also basically ruin his plans to go to the moon, since his arc Maxime was not yet complete.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Although they would not be able to decipher the poneglyph next to the
'Cause
golden
Nick
bell
Robin's not
because
there.
Robin is not with them at this time. And now with this country freed, and after they of course have a massive party, the crew can now continue back down to the ocean with one major change in the crew structure. Because I do feel like by this point the crew might be ready to accept Luffy as the actual captain. After all, he is the most headstrong and determined to help others, he has recruited most people, plus both Ace and Sabo eventually joined other crews, those being the Emperor Whitebeard for Ace and the Revolutionary Army for Sabo, so I don't really think that it's that much of a stretch to think that they would both eventually be okay with Luffy being the captain.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because if they follow other people eventually anyway, then yeah, why not?
Especially, of course, because Luffy's dream to become Pirate King is gonna be the goal that unites everyone else's dream as well. Ace has already made a pretty good name for himself and has people who love him. Sabo is free and helps free oppressed countries, so really Luffy is the only one driving everyone forward here, and this doesn't mean that Luffy will make every single decision from here on out, because he doesn't even do that with the current crew, but he still becomes the captain. And this is a super important decision that will be tested right away, because after the rigorous journey to reach the Sky Islands, the Sake Cup cruise ship is in very bad shape. Now remember that this is not the Going Merry, since they did not get her from Usopp's hometown, but still I think the crew would no doubt have some sort of attachment to that current ship.
Yeah.
So this could be a case where the crew actually might be split again on buying a new ship or repairing their current one, but just like in the original story, I think Luffy would probably see the need to buy a new ship anyways. And on top of that, we wouldn't get the whole
There wouldn't be the Usopp Luffy interaction reckon,
up
yeah.
leaving drama since he isn't as attached to this particular ship. So, with a new one and probably a new shipwright crewmate, the crew depart from Saba Odi. Wait, what? What about Frankie?
Frankie,
What about
yeah.
Ennis Lobby? Well, at this point, the crew doesn't even have Robin, so there would be no way for these government secret agents to blackmail them. And the whole saga was the
True.
reason that the crew befriended Frankie in the first place, so if none of that happened, then they wouldn't be able to have Frankie build the Thousand Sunny or recruit him into the crew. But they would still need a shipwright, so maybe they recruited this guy, Polly, who is constantly running from gambling debt anyways. Wow, this is shaping up to be a pretty incredible crew, but if
it's
you want to
cool.
know the saddest thing about this group, no Frankie means that we will never have the Straw Hat's strongest combo attack, the Pirate Ducking
Yeah.
6, but you can still use your most overpowered combo attack to smash that subscribe button below this video.
Oh, wow.
And even without Frankie, there's much more insane things to come for this headstrong crew. Now from here on out, they continue to sail around before eventually getting sucked into the zombie-infested thriller bark, where they still meet and recruit Brooke because
Yay.
Luffy has always wanted a musician.
Yes.
Really, no major changes here, and after curb stomping the Shadow Man, the group then very comfortably sails on to Saba Odi. And it is right here where we're going to dive into the truly game-changing alterations to the story.
Cool.
Because
Okay.
at Saba Odi, everything is going to go smoothly? Oh, that's right. The craziest part is that nothing crazy happens here.
Right. Okay.
I mean, they would probably still somehow meet this mermaid who would then
Yeah.
introduce them to the former right hand of the Pirate King, Silva's Rayleigh. And Rayleigh, of course, would be super excited to meet them all after learning about them from Shanks, and he immediately agrees to coat their ship so they can travel under the Grand Line towards Fishman Islands. And with his two older brothers watching over him, Luffy stays out of trouble. In fact, Rayleigh even gives the crew a hardcore crash course training camp, which
Right.
we'll be talking about in just
Yeah,
a
yeah,
moment.
yeah.
And then, after just a few days, they dive underwater towards Fishman Islands. So if you're following along, that means no 2-year
Time skip. Yeah. No time skip. Oh. Yeah. Nothing. Kuma's not gonna pop in and make everyone disappear.
time skip, which is of course a huge change to the story that is going to have massive consequences for the next part of this version. Of course, this means that we're skipping all of the Summit War saga, so no Amazon Lily, no Impel Down, or even Marineford, because
God.
this time the Donut Man is still safe and sound, and
You can't call him the Donut Man. That's so disrespectful.
with Luffy and Sabo. Which of course makes this the perfect time to talk about the world government, because at this time, the Sake Cup pirates are starting to get pretty famous. Luffy, Ace Sabo, and even Zoro would probably all be part of the worst generation of upcoming pirates, but the world government would not care about them nearly as much as they hated the Straw Hats in the original story. That's because there was no fiasco in Alabasta, no shooting down the flag at Ennis Lobby,
Oh, yeah?
no stealing Robin from the ZP9, or punching a Celestial Dragon. So to the world government, this is just another group of pretty annoying pirates, although they would probably still be keeping a close eye on Luffy and Ace because of their lineage. And since there's no Marineford, that means Luffy didn't spend all that time training during the time skip. However, as I just mentioned, they did get a crash course training with Rayleigh right before they left for Fishman Islands, where the Dark King himself at least showed them the basic idea of haki. And so of course characters like Sabo, Sanji, or Zoro who don't have devil fruits will be especially excited to finally learn haki so that they can actually continue to be able to fight strong devil fruit
Yeah, and Sabo's really freaking good with it as well.
users. Now, at this point, the Sake Cup pirates are a pretty fearsome group. They sailed through Fishman Island and the early parts of the New World without too much trouble, I'd say, but everything changes when they encounter the Whitebeard pirates on some random islands.
Right.
Which is, of course, a mind-blowing event for this crew because up until now, they've never faced off against any of the top-tier fighters of the world. Of course, the Sake Cup pirates get beaten down pretty badly by the Emperor's crew. And now I could imagine that just like in the original story, Whitebeard might invite all of them to join his crew. And while Ace originally did actually accept this offer, I don't think that Luffy would ever agree to work under anyone else.
No.
So Whitebeard could either kill them here, or the much more likely case, I think, is that he would let them go because he sees something special in Luffy and the crew.
Yeah, he understands the will of D, doesn't he? Like, he had that relationship with Roger and all that stuff, so... Yeah, I mean, maybe he knows that Ace is the son of Roger as well.
Which is a very lucky break because not everyone survives an encounter with an Emperor's crew. And so some more time passes as they sail around the new world, getting stronger. They're now exploring new islands, fighting strong opponents, and growing much in their own powers. And Luffy would probably have mastered at least Gear 2nd and 3rd at this stage, maybe even 4 if he practiced his Haki enough. And so now at this point, 1 year has passed in the new world, and we're roughly 1 year behind the original storyline.
Okay.
And eventually, we come to one of the most dangerous places in the new world, Wano, where the Sake Cup pirates are in for their next rude awakening. Because as they travel up the waterfall, the crew gets separated just like in the original story. Now, remember, we're still too early in the timeline for this to play out like normal Wano. The samurai, for example, who were sent forward in time have not yet arrived, but the country is still being dominated by Kaido. And Luffy, being Luffy, he would of course want to save the oppressed people there. And so just like in the original, Luffy on his own eventually leads to a major smackdown by Kaido, and Luffy is thrown in jail once again. At this same time, Sabo, Ace, and the rest of the crew have come to Onigashima looking for Luffy, where they encounter Kaido's child Yamato and quickly become friends. Yamato, despite her handcuffs, would of course want to join the crew, and together they head to save Luffy.
Makes sense, yeah, because she had the relationship with Ace originally, didn't she? Yeah, so, yeah.
From Udon Prison. And so we can argue a little bit about the battle here and if the crew would actually be able to defeat this funky dinosaur, but eventually the crew manages to save Luffy, as well as this samurai fishman Kawamatsu. Plus this grandpa here who teaches the three about Ryo, which ultimately leads to Ace freeing Yamato from her shackles.
Cool.
Now Luffy's of course fired up to make another attempt at the boss, but Kawamatsu, who was one of the legendary retainers of Odin, tells them that the time to free Wano has not yet arrived. And so instead, he asked them to come back in 3 years to help liberate Wano from Kaido's tyrannical rule. And despite Luffy really wanting to help right now, especially with Tama and so on and so forth, the crew departs, and now things become really interesting, because with Yamato on board, we have a top-tier fighter on the crew who can now finally teach everyone about Conquerors and advanced forms of Haki.
Yo, Yamato's actually on the crew.
Which brings us to another super important stretch of the
Wano.
story. Now, because we skipped over much of the normal New World islands, but I do think one arc that was incredibly important is the home of the Minks, which is Zou. Now, Kawamatsu should know about Zou since the Kozuki and the Minks are actually allies. So before separating, Kawamatsu gives them a Vivre card that will help them find the massive elephant Sonisha. As a result, this leads the Sakika pirates to finally climb up the elephant, where they then make friends with the animal Minks. However, the major question here is, do the Minks show Luffy and the crew the poneglyphs? I mean, you could argue that they would probably not, since there is no one from the Kozuki clan with the crew right now. Plus, they wouldn't have just saved the entire tribe. I mean, who knows? Maybe they have a letter from Kawamatsu who tells the Mink leaders to show them the poneglyphs, but even if they do get to see that road poneglyph there and learn all about the secret stones, they definitely can't read it yet. And honestly, I think it's just more reasonable that they don't get to see the poneglyphs here. Still, it would be one step closer to Luffy's dream of becoming the Pirate King. They could even take on a new crewmate like Pedro, who wanted to serve the next Pirate King, or Carrot might sneak aboard even if she wasn't invited. Now, after Zou, they continue sailing through the new world and practicing the advanced forms of Haki. At this point, I would say that Luffy, Sabo, and Ace, and probably even Zoro, are definitely above Warlord power level, so they can pretty easily defeat people as the Sandford user Crocodile and the Stringford user Doflamingo, which will be important in just a few moments. However, they are still undermatched against any of the Yonko, and when they next encounter Whitebeard, they are once again defeated by the world's strongest man and his crew. However, at this point, Whitebeard is getting older and sick, and the battle is much closer than it was the first time around. And so, with Whitebeard very impressed by how much the Sake Cup crew has grown in such a short time, I think they would probably become allies and could even exchange Vivre cards. And around this time, they could also, of course, find Elbaf, where Shanks could be waiting, but I still don't think Shanks would be quite ready to acknowledge Luffy yet. And so they might just end up skipping this island for now, but one island that they would definitely have to go to is Roadstar. Now, in case you forgot, Roadstar or Lodestar is the last island officially of the Grand Line, and it's originally where pirates are supposed to learn about the poneglyphs. And even though the Sake Cup pirates might have already learned about them from Zou, this would be a great place to stop because it would help them learn more about the mysterious stones. And although Luffy does have the voice of all things, it is not quite the same as someone who can literally read them. And this might actually set them on a path to cross the Red Line and sail the entire Grand Line once again to find the poneglyphs and someone who can read them, just like Roger did back in his days, although I do feel like Ace might not be that happy that they're literally following in his father's footsteps. Regardless, this now very overpowered crew goes all the way back to Reverse Mountain and starts the journey once again, and this time they liberate the islands that they skipped in the past. For example, Crocodile would already have taken control of Alabasta and the Civil War might already be over. But Luffy, Ace, and Sabo could come in and take down the warlords, and this would also be the perfect time for Robin to join the crew as well, which means that ZP9 could also try to blackmail her once again, but this might be a good thing actually because the crew would have no trouble smacking down these secret agents here. And it just feels good to see the crew dealing some punishment after they took such a beating in the original story. And so now, with Robin back on board and fully trusting the crew, they can return to the New World, saving islands and finding more poneglyphs. And this would probably be how their journey continues for a little bit more. The crew might even establish a home base island somewhere in the New World, but then something would happen that shakes the entire pirate world. That's because Blackbeard betrays Whitebeard and steals the Darkness Logia fruit. And once again, just like in the original, this single event is going to set off a crazy chain reaction that massively affects the entire story. Blackbeard could still become a warlord, he could still break into Impel Down and gather a stupidly powerful crew and go around collecting devil fruits. And then he could eventually return to challenge Whitebeard in a straight up war, which is actually not Blackbeard's style, but with Whitebeard sick and already dying, I think that he would certainly try to kill Whitebeard and then actually...
while he's weak, yeah, because he's a scumbag, isn't he? Blackbeard scumbag.
Take his legendary devil fruit. However, remember that at this point, the Sake Cup crew and Whitebeard's crew were basically allies, and when the crew notices Whitebeard's Viver card disintegrating, they would do everything in their power to save him. However, they would most likely be too late at this point, but this would definitely still set up the fated showdown between Blackbeard and Luffy. And of course, once again, there are tons of ways that this battle could possibly go. I mean, Blackbeard is so sneaky that he could still trick Luffy somehow and defeat the entire crew.
He is a sneaky bastard. Could figure something out, probably.
But the Sake Cup pirates are so insanely powerful at this point that it might not really matter. Sabo and Ace would be nearly as strong, if not as strong as Luffy, plus with Yamato, Zoro, and Sanji.
That's one hell of a team.
I feel like there's just no way that they could all lose to the Darkness Logia fruit user who barely just got his second devil fruit and barely got his crew together. However, I do think it would be very fitting that during this battle, Luffy finally awakens his mythical Sun God Nika fruit, because this would undoubtedly help him defeat Blackbeard, and together with his brothers, they would avenge Whitebeard's death. Which means, of course, that after this battle, the Sake Cup crew would be on a whole different level. I mean, some of the Whitebeard pirates might join, Luffy would surely become a new emperor, and the only thing stopping them from finding the One Piece would be the last few road poneglyphs and the other Yonko. However, stop. One opponent that we haven't really mentioned that much in this storyline is the world government. In fact, they might see Luffy as so much of a threat after awakening his devil fruit that they slap him with a bounty way higher than anything the world has ever seen at this point. Their goal would be to make Luffy the #1 target of every marine, bounty hunter, and pirate in the entire world, which is just an absurdly insane target to have painted on your back. In fact, turning it all up to 11, I actually might have figured out exactly how having an insane 100 billion berry bounty would change Luffy's journey, and you can watch that video right here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Shanks for watching. Wow. But no, that was a good what if. That was a really good what if. That was really interesting as well. I like how he took the times in and what events wouldn't happen, and then when they go back, when they'd happen and how they would be different and characters and things. Very good what if. Very good. Very, very interesting. And thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video I upload, links in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month is all I ask for. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for that. Thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe, leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch for some future videos. See you guys next time.